Good evening. The Union government on Monday deferred the implementation of the controversial General Anti Avoidance Rules or GAAR by 2 years and built in safeguards to check against possible misuse by tax authorities. The biggest safeguard is that GAAR will be invoked only in case of deals where the main purpose is to obtain tax benefit. And even in such cases, the tax department officials will be required to first issue show-cause notices containing reasons using the provisions incorporated into the law in the last budget. But the onus will be on the assessees who receive the notice to prove that the tax arrangement is not impermissible. This comes as a big shot in the arm for industry and investors alike, especially foreign investors. For foreign investors, the biggest gain is that non-residents investing via FIIs do not really have to worry now. It will, however, apply to FIIs that take advantage of benefits under tax treaties that India has with countries like Mauritius and Singapore. Even though the announcement has already galvanized markets, with the Sensex even crossing the psychologically significant 20,000 mark, tax experts have warned that the fine print needs to be relooked, given the recommendations of the Parthasarathy Shom Committee. Even the rupee now seems to be on a much-awaited comeback, tracking a sharp rise in local stocks. The rupee on Monday bounced back by 27 paise to close at over 1 week high of 54.49 against the US dollar, ostensibly on the back of the GAAR deferment. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight on The Big Picture, we take a look at the decision, its pros and its cons, and we ask our panelists whether this will be enough to attract the kind of foreign funds that India is looking for. Also, the big question, will it be able to tackle the CAD or the current account deficit? Power-packed panel tonight, Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, DGIAMR, Soma Banerjee, National Policy Editor of the Economic Times, Jagannadham, Thunuguntla, Equity Head at SMC Capital. Many thanks for coming on the show. I'd like to start with the guest on my immediate left. Dr. Mehrotra, first up, reactions on what the FM had to say. He mentioned that deferring GAAR till 2016, it's almost like getting the monkey off the back of foreign investors and would give investment the much needed thrust it needs right now. Your first thoughts?
My first thought is that when GAAR was attempted to be introduced by the previous finance minister, it was a bit hasty. We were not prepared for it. It was done specifically in response to a certain incident that had occurred in the last several months.
One particular case.
One particular case, and therefore it was necessary to defer so that to gear up our tax administration so that misuse by the tax authorities can be minimized, because it is a very sophisticated tax instrument and it is absolutely critical that our tax authorities are actually prepared for it. I mean, in more mature economies, more advanced economies, GAAR has been around for a fair length of time, in Australia all the way back since 1981. But we do need to move slowly and carefully on this, and that's very important because you don't want to kill the goose that supposedly lays the golden egg.
Absolutely. Soma Banerjee, first thoughts. Do you think much-awaited decision, of course, will give much-needed relief to big investors, big foreign investors, monkey off their backs?
Yeah, this was a monkey which they wanted off their backs, and I think it was kind of expected. I'm quite surprised that the market has reacted so sharply, because since the time that this was referred to the Parthasarathy Shom Committee, it was kind of discounted that it will not be coming in at least this year. What I think the finance minister has done is to give a bigger leeway. But I agree with my co-panelists that, this is something which we cannot wish away. This is something which has to remain in any mature economy, and we need to move towards that. Yes, we need our time, and so I think as far as foreign institutional investors or even foreign investors are concerned, they need to prepare for themselves for a GAAR regime in India as well, maybe more suited and tweaked to the Indian need requirements. But this is a reality which cannot really be put off. So the monkey can only be put off for some time, can't really be put away.
The monkey might be back. It will be back in 2016,
so
if you want to call it. It should be back.
Yeah. That's the point.
I want to come to Jagannadham for a bit. Markets have responded positively. 20,000 crossed. Thoughts?
One is markets are very different and complicated beast. I mean, one is the market should have went up irrespective of GAAR. What I'm trying to say is it was any which way in the mood of moving up. So
the rally was around the corner.
The rally was just a matter of time, maybe fiscal cliff, or maybe because of debt ceiling talks, or maybe because of RBI interest rate.
Good IT numbers.
RBI IT numbers, Infosys. I think these things were on any which way, the ingredients were any which way there for the market moving up. It was just a coincidence on the same day the announcement came that it moved up. So one is, as rightly said by the previous speaker, that market any which way it is not going to come this year or even the next year. So that is almost factored in. Plus, plus whatever the provisions that came are a lot liberalized. I mean, even if you see in comparison to the erstwhile proposed. So all in all, it just became it took a lot of credit. Whatever the market bonds, the GAAR provisions have took a lot of credit, which probably I don't think it really can be credited to.
Staying with you, Jagan, for just a quick question. The announcement came as a huge relief for investors who park their money in participatory notes, or P notes. What is the outlook on P notes now? For the benefit of our viewers, let me tell them. A P note or a participatory note is a derivative instrument that draws its value from investments made in Indian stocks floated by the FIIs. So, outlook on P notes?
Yeah, I mean, P notes, once the money is coming in, a lot of money, the history says that about 28% of the money comes from P notes, and there was a time when it reduced all the way to 18%, but it always swings between 18% and 28%. Now, I think even after the GAAR provisions, of course, good 3-4 years away, I think the P notes will have its own share of money coming through that route. I think whatever said and done now, people need not worry about this. People can think about valuations, and people can think about quality of the companies. The people can think about the basic ingredients of the investment style instead of worrying about the tax.
Right. Soma, there's nothing yet on the short-term capital gains tax. There was no announcement on that. The finance minister didn't even touch it, didn't even mention it. The FM has said nothing on it. So does that make GAAR relief just relief for now? And do you think the particular clause might perhaps be saved for the budget? Big bang announcement there.
Yeah, you can't rule out anything on capital markets when it comes to Mr. Chidambaram. He seems to have a fancy, or rather love, for the capital markets. But I think
it's a mutual thing, I think. They love him as well.
Yeah, I think that this time the flavor is more that he wants investments to come back. He's really been trying hard to give the right policy measures, the right signals, the right announcements, like you rightly said, on the right time. And so capital markets, I mean, capital gains tax is something which is in the evening, but it may just not come this budget, because remember, finance minister at this point really is wanting investments to come in. It's a struggle between growth, inflation, and populism, which to my mind, is something which may stop him from bringing back the capital gains tax.
It's a precarious line he has to walk. Dr. Mehrotra, do you agree? I'll come to you. Do you agree that there might not be a capital gains announcement in this particular budget? Maybe he'll wait for another year?
It's possible. You know, it's very difficult to assess what's on his mind. I must say that any finance minister at this point of time should be and must be worrying about the fact that over the last 3 or 4 financial years, we've seen a decline in tax revenue to GDP ratio. And you know, in an economy which has been growing reasonably robustly, I know growth has been down, but you cannot have a situation where tax to GDP actually declines, because historically when per capita income rises, tax to GDP tends to rise along with it. You know, we saw a peak of tax to GDP in 2007-8 of about 17.5%, and total revenue, when total revenue went up to 20% to GDP. But since then it went down to 15. Now this is not good enough. I mean, the fiscal deficit is very large. The pressure of reducing the fiscal deficit is tending to fall exclusively on expenditure compression. It cannot be so. It cannot continue to be so. So a finance minister has to focus his attention on increasing tax revenues. Whether this will be the way he will go or other ways, it remains to be seen.
I want to talk about that. It's a start, though. You want to get in a point. I'll take a break after that.
Yeah, in the evening, there was that news that IKEA, which was supposed to bring in about 1.8 billion euros, they have withdrawn their proposal from FIPB. Why? They were not supposed to open the cafeteria in their showroom. Come on, I think these are the things. I think the question is not about the GAAR alone. I think these are the basic nuances and the nuts and bolts where we have to get our act together.
Right, absolutely. We'll take a small break right now. I want to talk about what Dr. Mehrotra mentioned, about the deficit, about the current account deficit as well. That's after the break. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching The Big Picture. Welcome back to The Big Picture. I want to come to Soma first before I go to Dr. Mehrotra. Do you think, we talked about this before the break also, do you think that just accepting the Shom Committee's recommendation, most of them are accepted now. This is just that we're seeing it now, and the finance minister has said that they deferred GAAR. You think it's nothing more than just a signal to investors saying, look, we've deferred GAAR, come over here, invest, everything is all hunky-dory, and the major amendments and the reworking of the clause will come later?
Yeah, I think it is to do with signaling more than anything else.
More than anything else.
See, primarily what happened in the last 10 months ever since the budget was presented by the former finance minister, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, is this apprehension which was created in the minds of investors about clarity of taxes, whether it was with retrospective taxes, whether it was with new things like GAAR coming in. Remember, GAAR was like brought forward, clauses of GAAR was brought forward. So therefore, all these things had created a sense of uncertainty in the minds. And I think the finance minister, Mr. Chidambaram, is definitely trying to send out signals that India is a country where we would like investments to come in. So whether, if you look at the series of decisions which have been taken by the government, led primarily by the finance minister, they're all actually targeting towards giving that investor confidence, giving them that confidence that India is a country with proper regulations, with proper policies, with clarity in tax laws, etc. So I really think that this was more of a signaling point of view. The fact that it has been done before the budget, the fact that it has been done in the beginning of the year when you see funds really taking positions, I think all that should be kept in mind, because remember, Shom Committee recommendations came in almost about 2-3 weeks earlier, and they took so long to, of course, deliberate and came out with it. But the timing of the announcement and the fact that the finance minister is very keen to see, and we should not forget, he is going to Singapore and Hong Kong and the rest and meeting investing. So, what is he going to go there with? He needs to offer something, and I think this is something which he'd like to talk about,
Absolutely. The roadshow is very important. He's going away for a while. Dr. Mehrotra, I want to concentrate more on the effect this particular decision will have on the current account deficit. Now, because that's the big picture, really. I mean, we want foreign investment because we want the gap to reduce. We want the current account deficit to come under control. This is, of course, a big step towards that. But is it enough? What else do we need in terms of, let's say, quick policy decisions? I was reading a prominent business portal today, and they likened the step of and the resulting market share to a junkie getting a quick narcotics fix. Slightly harsh, but we get the point.
Well, I'm not very optimistic about the GAAR decision actually impacting FII in a big way. FII inflows into the country, and therefore capital inflows increasing, and thus the current account.
So you don't see a direct relation between
there's
FII
some relationship, but there's not one hell of a strong relationship. Is really what I'm implying, because as Soma rightly said, some of these things have already been factored in. It had been postponed in any case. He was, and there is a signaling effect, of course. And the other thing, let's just remember, is that, the current account deficit is becoming almost structural. 4% is certainly not acceptable. And you can't cover your current account deficit with FII money. You see, FII, if you were trying to cover it with FDI, foreign direct investment, which is long-term investment in productive capacity, that makes a lot of sense. So something has to happen on that. The FII money is, by definition, hot money, and it can flow in and out and all the time, and it can. I think if you want me to go back to the issues to what we need to do about, fixing the current account deficit, I think one of the things that we certainly need to do is to come down quite harshly on gold imports. I don't think enough has been done in that regard. Too many people are still, hedging the bets against inflation and going on, and this is just not on. We still remain one of the biggest importers of gold, and this is simply not acceptable.
Right.
So the government really needs to come down quite harshly on that. There's not, sorry?
No, he's hinted that he wants to cut down.
And I think he's going to come in before the budget on that.
Well, that would be wonderful, because we really need that quite badly. It's already excessively delayed. I think too little happened on that account in this last fiscal, and we just really need to come down quite harshly on that.
Jagan, obviously you agree with the fact that gold imports need to be cut, but do you also think that this particular decision was more because he's going away on a roadshow and he needs something in his hands right now, otherwise he won't really have much to say to them?
I mean, to be fair to him, because since the time he took the office in September, I think he has done many things. I mean, let's be fair.
He's been quite a proactive.
Because there was a point almost they put their entire government at risk. I mean, of course, they have the numbers, and in one way or other, that's a different thing. But they have done many things. I think if they can able to pull even GST, I think that will be much more credible and stronger impact, because different studies show that there will be about 50 basis point difference in the GDP. That means it will add to the GDP straight away. So all in all, I think they have done their bit. had he done only GAAR, probably we would have rated that it's only for roadshow. I think he has some more credentials to show on his resume to back this.
And do you think, like Soma said, he might act on the gold import just before the budget? What's the outlook on that?
Yeah, I think they may. But one thing we have to remember is that the RBI or the government is not investment consultant to tell what to invest and what not to. Right. And it is very much very much cultural aspect in India. How can you stop that people buying gold? Even if they increase the import, it will lead to the smuggling or anyway other routes of getting the gold into the country. So that may not serve the purpose, because the past shows that that will never the basis to reduce the prices. So I think that too, gold being an international commodity, I think the impact of Indian policy making may not be that high, frankly speaking. So all in all, we have to live with that gold prices being high.
Before I go to Soma, I want to ask you one more question. Like Dr. Mehrotra said, he doesn't see like too much of a connection between deferring GAAR and getting the FIIs to actually balance the current account deficit. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. That's what I was saying. The markets were expected, were any which way moved to go up, and FII inflows were any which way happening. I think GAAR maybe just the timing of the announcement was too good. I mean, that doesn't mean that the market moved because of that announcement.
Absolutely. Soma, let me come to you. I'll come to you as well. There is also this view that Mr. Chidambaram was quite low on options. He didn't have too many options, that he's sort of doing this one-legged dance with the markets to keep the markets happy, because virtually all avenues of raising revenue or maybe scaling down big ticket expenditure items are closed to him. Do you agree that he really didn't have any option? He has a dearth of options?
As opposed to the GAAR?
Announcing that GAAR being deferred and keeping the markets happy.
I really don't agree. I think there are avenues where revenue can be increased apart from the expenditure side. For one, and I know I'm probably in a minority on this, I think the government needs to get back customs duty on crude oil. I mean, it is one huge import. It is something which has been appreciating everywhere around the world. Oil duties are something which goes to finance government budget to a large extent. Yes, we waived off the tax on the duty on crude oil when prices rose, but $100 a barrel is a reality today which we have to live with. And I think the effect that it has on consumer prices should also be passed on, because consumers need to realize that this is not coming free and it's not easily available for India. So, the supply side, the demand side management, which is completely absent, needs to come in. And I think that's an area where I think the finance minister definitely has scope to bring in more revenue, apart from, other things like broadening the tax net and better revenue realization. Maybe some excise on the negative list as well. So, and I personally think that those things are being looked into, may find a place in the budget. Just the fact that this is going to be an election budget, so the finance minister is hemmed in from that point of view. But I agree completely that the current account deficit is a huge point of worry. It's not going to give enough room for the RBI as well, seeing that no matter what happens to inflation, to really bring rates down. And the finance minister will have to look at something to do about revenues. Absolutely.
You have a point to make, sir. Make that point, we'll go into break.
Right. No, I wanted to make a very specific point as to what is GAAR to be contrasted with, counterposed against. There is something called specific anti-avoidance rules, SAR. That is what is in place as of now, and that is what is going to continue. My sense is that the postponement of the GAAR is related to our need to continue to get P-note, money from P-note sources, so that money which was flowing through Mauritius, Singapore doesn't disappear overnight. Let's not forget that there is a fair bit of money by Indians stored outside. There has been round-tripping going on, and round-tripping is what they want to continue to encourage. That's essentially the story here. That's the bottom line.
I think that's a very, very important point, because remember, apart from all the investor climate, GAAR was supposed to be a step towards containing black money. It was supposed to be a step towards containing the parallel economy. Okay, so it was supposed to be the government's defense for the black money racket and all that was created by the opposition. So today, if the opposition really gets up on this and wants to make a noise about it, they actually have a very strong case, because you're really diluting your ways, and I agree completely. You're actually, in fact, in a very rounded way, encouraging round-tripping of
which was not earlier.
There's a very small and very important point, however, that needs to be underlined here. When round-tripping used to take place in China, and there was a very significant amount of round-tripping in China, it came in the form of FDI. And that is extremely important. In our country, the round tripping is happening through in the capital market.
Right,
that's not good enough. That's a real problem.
Probably China may be slightly blessing in disguise there, because they didn't have great capital markets. They didn't have vibrant capital markets.
Yes.
That actually proved to be blessing in disguise, because that has helped them bringing back the money for creating
Hong Kong, Macau, the money came back as in the form of FDI, which was wonderful for the growth of
See,
that.
FDI
Whereas
is a
in
more
India,
stable
we have
money.
a vibrant capital markets in comparison to vibrant economy. That is proving to be a
sort of
win for us.
Absolutely. Hold that thought. I want to talk a little bit more about that, but that's after the break. More on round tripping, more on GAAR, more on what effect it's going to have in the near future and what it holds for Mr. Chidambaram and company. That's after the break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the big picture. Dr. Mehrotra, Soma just mentioned that there is scope for the finance minister to act in some particular areas, perhaps on customs duty as well. What else can he look at right now? What do you think what options does he have to tackle the current account deficit?
The current account deficit. I mean, I've already mentioned the gold imports, and I'm really pleased that Soma also mentioned the tax on oil. I think that's very, very, very important. At this point, the more important is to try and sort of, if the rupee continues to depreciate, it's not a biggest source of worry, because it will increase our export competitiveness, and I think that is another source of actually closing the current account deficit.
He's actually gaining.
I know it is gaining, but that's the problem, that you defer GAAR, more FIIs come in, more force, you've got a real crunch here.
Right.
So I'm saying, you've got to that's the reason, precisely the reason why I'm talking about sort of try and do everything possible in the next 6 months or 8 months to actually encourage exports.
Right. Jagan, thoughts on, first of all, rupee is looking slightly better, 27 paisa, I think it just went up. Outlook on the rupee, also, what options does the finance minister really have, apart from, okay, this is for the markets, this is for the investors, but how does he really tackle the CAD?
I think one is, let me be very clear, this GAAR related is not the real reason for the rupee impact or the market impact. That's first
It was
thing.
already going to happen.
Yeah,
That's something we agree on.
Second point is if the debt ceiling related, US debt ceiling related debate, which is scheduled for next 6 weeks, and if that heats up, then what will happen is a lot of money will go back to dollar, because the money will chase for safe haven. In that process, the rupee will weaken. Make no mistake, rupee will weaken. Even Indian markets may go up, that's a different point, but rupee may weaken for a simple fact that money is going to away from the non-dollar currencies to the dollar. So in that sense, probably rupee may remain under pressure.
And measures to tackle the CAD more?
I think current account, as rightly said by previous speakers, we have to do the gold imports. But I wonder, considering the cultural impact of India, how far that is possible to do it. And from the oil point of view, that is also a good one. But the only thing is that may add up to the inflation.
Right.
I think RBI may or may not like it that much. Yeah.
Shoma, last word on the show to you as usual. You already mentioned what he could perhaps do, what scope does he have, but and you agree with Dr. Mehrotra when he says that this is not really, FII is not really going to tackle, FII money is not going to tackle the CAD. As it is, FII is kind of volatile and fickle, and we can't really, it's hot money. If the GAAR announcement has had the desired effect on at least the market, if we cannot really depend on foreign capital to help us with the CAD and the measures you mentioned, what else do we have, options-wise?
I know this is good. This is again very difficult, but the government has to show the way. Public spending has to go on. So public sector spending, which is really not taken off, if you look at the capital expenditures of most of the public sector organizations, which the Prime Minister's office has been trying to chase up, it's really not happening. Companies have been sitting on a lot of cash pile, which they've not spent. Someone has to start investing, and you can't expect FII's money to come in and start the investment process. Without investments or without growth coming in, you can't have revenue. It's an egg and chicken situation.
Right.
One thing I'd like to end with, and it was quoted in one of the newspapers, Mr. Chidambaram recently had a very drastic haircut, because that seems to be the only thing he has control over, not on the expenditure side of the government. So I think he can look at sending the public sector markets to public sector companies to start spending, to see that investments come in, the cycle to begin, and only then can you really bet on revenues to be generated.
Right. On that note, I must thank all my guests, and before I sign off, Jagannadham, Thunuguntla, thank you so much for joining us. Soma, Banerjee, pleasure as always. Dr. Mehrotra, many thanks for joining us on The Big Picture. Like my guests, of course, said, this is a good announcement for the markets. The investors will be happy, but that's, of course, only a short-term thing. We need to do more. We need to look at spending. We need to keep our structural problems at bay for us to actually tackle the CAD. That's all the time we have on The Big Picture tonight. Athar Khan saying goodbye, good night, and thank you for watching.